This video is brought to you by Slate Black Industries. For grips and accessories, visit slateblackindustries.com. Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Today, Josh is going to be taking a break, but instead we'll be joined by Jonathan Ferguson, keeper of firearms and artillery at the Royal Armoury Museum. Jonathan Ferguson, keeper of firearms and artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. I hope to see you at the debrief. Enfield No.4 Mark I T sniper rifle. T, meaning the tea that we shall be served when we gain our victory over the Huns. T.
T, from the colonies.
Americans. Oh, that's good. That's good, isn't it?
All right, 150. Impact. Yikes, that guy's barely hanging on.
Oh.
200, on target. Impact. Impact. All right, 250. Impact, just right of center.
Right of center.
Confirmed. Impact. Pretty much centered up.
Oh, good.
We're there, 300. Impact on the low edge. So yeah, go ahead and give it a bit more here in terms of elevation. Nice. Just below center.
Oh, good.
All right, 350. Basically dead center. Just maybe an inch of low of center. Really
Okay.
good. Nice, up in the upper chest.
Good.
Just right of center on that.
Good, good.
I'm there, 400.
Righto.
Impact on the lower quarter of the plate. And probably give it just a touch more elevation. Yeah, all right. Also on the lower quadrant.
Ah.
Okay.
I shall dial elevation.
Let's do it.
Too high of center. Ready when you are.
450. Impact on the lower edge of the plate. Good elevation, but miss off the right edge. Just off the right edge.
I was really hoping to go into the bonus round with this.
Eighth of a target to the right. All right, good elevation though on that one. Impact. Right in the belly button area.
Belly, but okay.
just a bit low there.
So the next one I should aim quite a bit more.
And we are on at 500.
Ah, 500, sir.
It's an impact on the lower right quadrant of the plate. Miss off the right edge. Based on those two, I'd say, are you basically dead up on
Yes.
windage?
So press left?
Yeah, press left. Nice. Impact.
Very clear impact.
It was. That was a chunky one. Well, quite an effective rifle. Quite an effective rifle.
So some have said that the M41B, the Swedish sniper rifle, is the best sniper rifle in World War II. I maintain, and it is by a thin margin, by the way, that I prefer the No.4 MkI because I do think there are certain amenities to the MkI that the Swede does not have. However, again, thin margin. But Josh, we can't put up a score like that without going
Trying a bit more.
for more.
The problem is, Henry, there's a lot of very, very tall, high grass.
Right.
Can you even see the 650 out there?
No.
Okay, so you see the 500.
I see the turkey.
We could try the turkey. That's 700.
Okay.
You want to try that?
Yeah. So last one I did 500. Let me try to bump it up to the 400 setting right here.
All right, I'll see if I can try to see where the trace comes in on this.
Just give me a couple spots first, I say. Ready.
Yes, sir.
I will hold left.
Yeah, left edge here?
Yep.
Okay. Quite a bit short, maybe almost like a full target short.
Okay.
Windage actually looks halfway decent. I might press off the left, maybe a quarter target more.
Okay.
Okay, splash was just underneath his chest, just underneath where his headline is. So come up a half a target, and you can ease back the windage to left edge.
Whoa.
Splash just in front of him, right at his feet.
All right. I will not even dial for this one. Ready?
Yes, half a target high. That came in short off the left edge. Yeah, yes, sir, indeed.
The American chicken
Hip hip cheerio.
has been eliminated. But we're fighting the Germans, aren't we?
Ben Franklin, isn't Ben Franklin the one who wanted the turkey to be the American?
Yeah. Desecrating the American symbol.
Yes, the
But-
Brits strike back.
Wrong
Brits
era, Josh. Wrong era. We're friends right now. We're friends. So
A few moments later.
at the request of Jonathan, we are going to take the Lee-Enfield No.4 MkI out to 1,000, which is its max effective range on paper.
in 20-mile-an-hour winds.
28. Okay.
Just off the left edge. Good elevation. That one came in over the top by like a target, maybe a full target over the top.
Okay. Windage was good.
Yeah. Impact, top line of the plate.
Ooh, I hear it. That was a very apparent impact too.
It was. Just off the left edge, top quarter of the plate.
off the left edge, top quarter of the plate.
Yes.
So we're on to like windage stuff now.
Impact.
All right, that should be dialed in now. Ready?
Send it. Impact. Left edge.
All right.
Makes sense. It's gusting really hard right now.
Yeah, it's definitely dialed in now. Yeah, so there you are, Jonathan. We have your 1,000 yard. It was, I think it could go even farther than that, but to be honest, as we've seen compared to before, this is already less reliable on the impacts. At the cusp, if we're using World War II ammunition and not modern reloads, certainly I don't think it would be as effective. But we'll see you guys back. The Lee-Enfield No.4 Mark 1T. Mine is not a true Mark 1T. Mine is a faux sniper. Of course, this is a real sniper. Let me get the atrocity of the T away.
I'm glad that you shot the entire video with that like half in front of the rifle.
Sponsored by Arizona green tea, right?
Yeah.
The 99-cent Arizona green tea I picked up this morning.
Yes, pay us. Pay us, Arizona green tea.
So, yeah, where do I start? One of the kind of the staple rifles to our channel so far has actually been the Lee-Enfield No.4 Faux T. Faux meaning fake in French. Haha, not in English. But this is a true T-marked No.4 Mark 1 T sniper rifle with a true number 32 optic that is paired to it with the mount. A very impressive setup. Minimal adjustments going out, and these things were accurized and handpicked and worked over by the prestigious firm Holland & Holland. I do think it was one of the best sniper systems in World War II. But there's a lot to argue on that, obviously. It's very difficult to also... The Swedish Mauser peaks in different ways. I think this has certain things that accommodates it as a really good sniper system, and a larger mag capacity and certain things that the Lee-Enfield brings, and a faster bolt action.
Wait, why aren't you comparing it to the esteemed Mosin sniper?
So how did this compare to the Mosin though? The Mosin, we don't have an 800-yard target today, and the elevation was a little bit off, yes. But compared to the Mosin, I believe, did the Mosin clean the course at 500? Or I think there was like 1 or 2 misses.
It was very similar.
Yeah, so between the two, I mean, it did very, very similar. I must say, the German sniper did not do as well as either the British or the Russian. So when out there, when you're playing Company of Heroes and you're wondering why is the British sniper so OP, overpowered, this is why. Because the Brits actually came up with an amazing sniper system. In fact, the base system then turned into the L42 later on, which is essentially a rechambered Lee-Enfield No.4 rechambered into 308, essentially sporterized, and it carried the British military all the way through the Falklands before it adopted yet another innovation in sniper technology, the L96. I have a lot of passion for this system. The Canadians, the Brits, I believe the Aussies and the Kiwis also had them, but a symbol to Commonwealth troops in World War II, and there's enough for us to talk about for hours here on range, but we shan't. Shall we see you at the debrief?
Let's head over.
They've said that snipers commit an act of ungentlemanly warfare. Well, guilty as charged, Your Honor. I hope you're enjoying the show thus far. Shows like this, they're brought to you by Slateblackindustries. But most importantly, we're supported by the patrons of Patreon and Utreon. That's right, this lovely group of men and women, they support us financially, intellectually, but most importantly, emotionally. So today I'd like to invite you, come, join us, become one of us. Together, we'll set our sights on the future development of small arms. But if you cannot, that's all right. We completely understand. We'd be just as happy if you were to leave us a comment right below. But for now, let's get on with it.
So, welcome to the debrief. We are joined, of course, by Jonathan Ferguson, keeper of firearms and artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. Welcome to the show, Jonathan Ferguson. No, I'm not going to do that again.
It's been a feedback loop of job titles there.
So, welcome back to the show. I really appreciate you taking time to chat about the lovely Lee-Enfield No.4 Mark1T.
Thank you for having me.
I felt that this would be most appropriate to have someone who spent so much time, especially in the UK, with UK firearms, to get to talk about the history, the development, how the No.4 Mark1T was received to the troops, or what the perception was, the feedback, and how the performance that we saw today sort of reflected that. I was especially so excited that I went back out and shot this at 1,000. And I was very glad that you encouraged me to get the 1,000-yard shot. So the No.4 Mark1T, well, my previous one that we've shown on the channel was what I call the faux T. It was basically just a regular rack No.4 that I had thrown a no drill mount on and use a sort of Canadian-ish equivalent, because the Canadians have had some Weaver K2 5s on the Mark1Ts when the optics evidently were coming very, very, very small quantities when the optics were becoming rare and difficult to find.
I believe that's right. Yeah, Ian Skennerton's book, The Lee-Enfield Story, is the kind of the Bible on that, and he has a chapter on kind of make, do, and mend, and finding different scopes to fit to the Canadian rifles, and Weaver was an option for sure.
I mean, it was right here in North America. It made absolute sense logistically. So previously, I've sort of had time on a facsimile of this real Mark1T, and I've always wanted to bring one back to the show, but outside of just seeing it shoot, to actually learn about a little bit more of the development history, because this was the era, correct me if I'm wrong, that rifles would be taken from general production and then upgraded, and that's what happened to the 98Ks. That's what happened to a lot of different sniper systems, and the Lee-Enfield was no different, right?
That's right. Yeah, we are, and we're kind of relearning the lessons of the First War on the training side and on the specialized rifle side. They were, I guess, ahead of the curve in that when the No.4 was on the drawing boards, right from that point, so 1925, there was a requirement for a new sniping rifle. So we should have been well ahead of the curve, but as it happened, the thing didn't get introduced until, for the UK certainly, well into the war. So the best laid plans didn't really pan out there, and they entered the war with the P14, the Pattern 1914, or Rifle No. 3, as it was known then. We have those here as well, and that thing has the offset scope still, and a 1918 pattern optic. So not ideal. You got the Canadians coming into the war, I think, still with Ross rifles with Warner and Swayze scopes. So an absolute, basically, we're coming into the war with our First World War setups, and they are absolutely rack grade rifles, but as far as possible, and this applies to the No.4 as well, they are selecting the best, testing them for accuracy, favoring factories that have better QC, and doing it that way. But if you whip the scope off, it's essentially just a hand-picked, with a couple of tweaks, as you know, standard infantry rifle. We are well away from the days of the dedicated sniper rifle. So, let me grab this one. So this is basically the same as yours, but it's here in my hands. We do have the nice leather lens protector, of course. And on this one, at least, you can see the magazine cutoff there. And I can't remember if yours has. Yeah. So
mine does not.
That's indicative of, this is relatively early production, I guess. So these are converted. So they're not, like, even though they plan to have a sniper rifle or sniping rifle in parallel, as in theory, it would be a variant, like a family of rifles. That didn't happen. And you've got bog standard rifles getting converted. And the first batch, I believe there were 1,400-ish initial batch at the Royal Small Arms Factory Enfield, where a lot of this collection comes to us from. They were set up like this, and that establishes the configuration with this sort of screwed on side mount, but it's over the bore, as you have ably shown, and it's quite low to the bore as well, relatively speaking. No more charger loading, of course. They've done away with that. No more offset to the side, which was kind of crazy. And anecdotally, at least, snipers would rather have the optics taken off than mess with their head over here. And then, of course, you've got a cheek piece on here to get your head up to the line of the scope. But otherwise, it's pretty standard No.4. And the reason I mentioned the cutoff is that these are converted from No.4 trials rifles. Your typical No.4 Mark 1, loads of your viewers will have them, I'm sure, or have seen them or shot them. They are not fitted with a magazine cutoff. That was deleted in the Great War for reasons of economy. By the way, the Germans tried to claim that this was for snapping the tips off bullets to make dum-dum bullets. Pretty sure they knew that was a lie, but anyway. And then, this is often cited as kind of British conservative or military or both conservatism, stuck in the mud. We keep our 10 rounds in reserve and we fire on command. Well, right off the bat in 1914, there was an order went out that said, this is to be, where fitted, this is to be used as an additional safety device. So they realized that warfare had, I think maybe it's 15, they realized warfare had changed. But weirdly enough, they put it back on for the No.4 trials rifle. So only a few thousand of those made, and 1,400 of them get converted into the very first of the No.4 T. So the one I picked up today is one of those converted rifles. But that's going to be a relative rarity. There's 26,000 plus of these things set up over the course of the war, mostly later on. Only a few of these, relatively speaking, have the cutoff, which is, to use the British expression, like tits on a fish. It is absolutely pointless. It's arguably pointless on the infantry rifle, and it's completely pointless on a sniper rifle.
So the funny thing is, though, if you put this into the modern context, you actually have people nowadays in the sporting world buying magazines that are blocked off, so you could load only one round. So for the modern sniper, it could be argued that you could use a cutoff. And the other thing is, too, you could switch the different types of cartridges out for modern snipers. But obviously, this was a legacy design, much like the 03A4 having the magazine cutoff, the on-off switch on the left side for the American one.
Yeah. You also had to cut the battle sight off the folding iron sight so that the scope would fit, meaning that you can still unscrew this thing, whip the scope off, keep it safe if you anticipate having to not shoot at great distance, and still use it as a conventional clip-fed or charger-fed infantry rifle with a decent range of sight of iron sight on there.
I do like that you brought up the fact that UK specifically, sorry, Great Britain specifically, chose an over-the-bore and lower mounted optic with a cheek piece, and did away with the charger load system, because compared to, like, when you compare this to the Swedish M41B, the 98K sniper, the PU sniper, much of those you're shooting really with a chin weld. Now, at this point, I'm used to it. Um, but it's certainly not something that you would prefer to do if you're in the field, especially the high mounted optics. What I've learned in the long term, when you cock your head high, like so, if you're in a
Hmm.
prone position or if you're in a strange position, it's either you deal with recoil very difficultly, a much different recoil sensation, um, uh, or the 303 is not too powerful. It's not like a 7.92 like 8 mil Mauser, but
Hmm.
the neck strain that comes from looking through an optic for an extended period of time with your neck cocked up high like that. I certainly think this is a far more comfortable setup to have your eye behind for an extended period of time. You were talking about refurbishment. Holland and Holland did the refurbishment of these. Holland and Holland, known for very posh, very nice rifles.
Yes, indeed. I think people hear that or read that and think that they were involved in this design. To my knowledge, this is a Royal Small Arms Factory design. Maybe they had some consultancy from the sporting world, I don't know. But Holland and Holland don't take over doing the work until September 1942, by which time we have like 1,400 of them set up at Enfield already. The design drawings are done. And in theory, we're gearing up to provide sniper rifles to whoever needs them. In reality, they don't get into the field, I don't think, until late 42. So most of those rifles that enter the hands of British snipers are indeed set up by Holland and Holland. And those are the guys you want fettling a precision rifle, making your ordinary rifle more precision, stripping
Mm-hmm.
it down, rebedding everything in a particular fashion. I mean, this is not a precision design, but Holland and Holland were capable of making it as precision as anyone else. Probably more so. The scope, that's definitely not their design. That was designed, as some of your viewers will know, for the Bren light machine gun.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so if you look at the Mark 1 Bren, there's a dovetail mount on the left-hand side of the receiver, or the body as the Brits called it. And that was intended for this number 32 Mark 1 optic, which is kind of ahead of its time in some ways, not in others, because we don't, well, I guess we're putting optics on LMGs now, right? But it's taken a while to get to that point. So it was designed for that purpose, but it was never actually tested even. And so they shelved that. So this is 37. They shelved that until, well, I guess 1940, when they realized they have an off-the-shelf design for a 3-power optic for this thing. So that all comes together. Obviously, the mount's pretty critical as well. Hand-picked rifles, cheek piece on the stock, and in theory, you're good to go. But really, you should be training your snipers and coming up with some kind of materials to help them refer to in the field, and not making them learn it all from scratch like Richard and the guys did in the First War. You're making them do that again in the Second War.
I think you told me that the manual stated that the max effective range was 1,000.
So the scope is supposed to be graduated from 100 to 1,000, and that's reflected in as far as the manual goes. Well, the manual I'm looking at is from 51, so can't remember if there's a first issue before that, but the one that's easily accessible is 1951, and it's So I guess effective range, maximum range, discuss, but I think this one's fairly clear cut and is borne out by the actions on the field, as it were. Yes, you can shoot this thing and hit a man at 1,000 yards in good condition, suitable conditions, shall we say. You're not being shot at. You're not cold, wet, and miserable. Well, maybe you were.
The proverbial in theory.
Yeah, but we read all sorts of nonsense effective ranges for small arms, don't we? And people comparing them in top trumps fashion, like the AK can only do 300 yards and the M16 is good for 800, no problem at all. And of course, the truth is somewhere in the middle, and the shooter is so much more important, as you show every time on this channel.
I've had my moments to where I royally fuck up, but this was no, the Lee-Enfield No.4 Mark 1T is absolutely a joy to shoot. So when was the No.4 T really being used in the battlefield?
So it's approved for service, I think, February 42, but it doesn't. I don't believe it enters service, like active service, until late 42, and that's in the North African campaign. And it's kind of, well, there are several problems there from what I gather. One being that North Africa was quite dynamic and maybe not blitzkrieg, but mobile enough that snipers, as they were conceived of at that time, were maybe not that helpful. The other problem is that this is a brand new configuration. You're going to have teething problems with it, depending on the quality control over the selection of the host rifle, and then of the. I mean, I have no issues with Holland and Holland setting them up. I'm sure that was all fine, but according to some accounts, they're not necessarily fully reliable. I don't really understand why not. Somebody talks about. Well, I think it's Clifford Shaw. We get a lot of information on the use of this from Clifford Shaw. His book is With British Snipers to the Reich, by the way. That's one of the best sources for this stuff. And he talks about jams with this thing. Now, he's not talking about the classic rim jam thing that we see with modern ammo. He's talking about magazine, feed stoppages due to weak or badly made magazine springs. So he said, well, tell me what you think about, because one of the reasons I might say that this is a better design for World War II is you've got 10 rounds on board, so you can have your scope over the action. You don't need to have it offset, but you don't need to rely on clip loading because you've got 10 rounds on board. Do you think that's an advantage?
I think it's an advantage if you don't have to, if you could have interchangeable magazines. Otherwise, after the first 10 rounds, you're down to the same operations as every other sniper out there. The O3A4 is 5-round side fed. The Mosin Nagant sniper, the PU sniper, the M41B, the 98K sniper, even the JAP 99 sniper, those were all fed the same way. But at the same time, it's a sniper rifle.
Yep.
I mean, you're not charging into the trenches with it. But if you were, you have 10 instead of 5.
Yeah, this is something that Clifford Shaw addresses directly in his book. And it says essentially that, with the added subjective view that the spring is a problem, So he specifically references the First War and how the Mad Minute and all that was, or the combat version of that was so critical, halting the German advance. Great, 10 rounds on the rifle. It was a boon then, but he argues that it isn't now, and certainly not for a sniper. So he clearly kept 5 rounds in his rifle.
Oh.
So if we're doing top trumps, 5 rounds, 10 rounds, clearly the Lee-Enfield wins. Not necessarily in this case. So I think that's interesting. The biggest problem, though, I don't think is the weapon. Although, interestingly, the same source points out that if you have to have the touch with the action, and I clearly don't. And he's alluding to, and he makes a racing car analogy, if I remember rightly, that if you fumble the bolt, if you don't give it enough elbow grease at the right point of the stroke and all that, you will induce that stoppage regardless of the magazine. I thought that was interesting.
So there's a difference. If you, I'll roll some footage right here between my personal hunting rifle, which is the faux T, and that rifle has had a lot of rounds. I've put a lot of rounds through that rifle. It's always well oiled, and you could see the cycling speed is incredibly fast. However, for this one, because it's a loner T, I did not I did not shoot a lot of cartridges out of it, for respect of the rifle's owner.
Of course.
I'm not going to drag this rifle through World War II paces, and so you'll see that it is significantly slower. Now, I didn't oil or grease it like I did my personal one, so part of it there. But the Lee Enfield action is a when you get it, you get it, but when you don't, you don't.
Mm,
I agree with his assessment on that, especially if you're used to the Mauser actions. The cock on close it's a it takes some time to get used to, but once you get used to it, it's fairly nice. I would imagine though, in the desert environment, if you're not oiling it,
yes. Or
and
even
you
if you
would
are.
you wouldn't with the type of sand that's in North Africa. You wouldn't really want to oil it because that would attract a lot of grime and little particles that would actually induce stoppages. And
Yeah.
so in a dry environment, I would imagine it would look more like how I was shooting it versus my personal one that is well oiled.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the issues we're talking about here are common to the No.4, and don't forget the No.4 en masse is only really coming in, round about the same time. 41 onwards. This is coming in 42 onwards. So a lot of the foibles that people are talking about, or you can read into accounts at least, apply to it's the same weapon. So I don't think we can be too harsh on that. But there is the issue of it's been set up, bedded, zeroed as a sniper weapon with the scope. And again, the same guy, he references what he calls rogue rifles. Now, we hear about this with Mosin Nagants a lot. They can be superbly accurate. They can be the proverbial garbage rod. And that applies to every milsurp type rifle, effectively. And it applied at the time as well. And he talks about rifles that shot fine out to 200 yards and were terrible beyond 200 yards. And he refers to them as rogue rifles. And of course, you don't know what you're going to get until you get it. So that's a factor as well. The other issue, though, I've alluded to, and that is the lack of training and kind of pamphlets to go back and refer to, So they're essentially, and we see this a lot with military procurement. It happened with the M16 in Vietnam to a significant extent. They issue the brand new piece of kit. They don't give you the handbooks, the manual of arms. They don't, and in Vietnam, it was the replacements who didn't get this, but proper instruction on how to clean the thing in that case, and proper instruction on how to effectively be a sniper. Apart from guys like the Lovett Scouts who are trained as deer stalkers, you're learning this on the job. And what a thing to have to learn on the job, So I think that was the biggest issue. Not so much I've talked a bit about the account of the hardware being a problem. I would de-emphasize that and say that it's more the classic failure of introducing a new service weapon. It takes several years to get up to speed, by which time you're in Berlin or, well, in this case, you're in Italy, which is where a lot of the good work was done by snipers who had learned how to shoot and had weapons that now worked properly. They've maybe binned off the ones that didn't work very well, and they're actually out there doing good work. And also, the way the campaign is working, you've got more static opportunities to set up ambushes, scout ahead, and lie in wait, whether that's urban terrain, built-up stuff, the proverbial church steeple that you're hiding up, or trees or whatever, or whether it's the mountains. Because the Lovett Scouts went out to Canada for several months, I think it was, to train. Mountain warfare cadre was something that came much later, but it's based on that kind of, we're going to send you out in Arctic kit, hopefully, maybe not then, with your weapons, and you will learn how to fight and shoot in that environment, and then we'll deploy you somewhere where that might actually be helpful. So they are an interesting case study that I'd like to actually learn more about, in that they're the closest thing to an elite unit of snipers that you're going to get to. Otherwise, snipers are assigned 2 per battalion, I think it was, and they're present across the infantry force. So we don't quite get this regimental war diary legacy of accounts. We don't so much get, a lot of them didn't write very much down. There'll be some stuff on the Imperial War Museum Oral History Archive that I would love to dig into there. Otherwise, we have a couple of accounts. There's a new book coming out soon from one of my predecessors, Martin Pkwy. I just discovered today. He hasn't told me this, but there is a new book coming out that people will want to check out. So this is going to be called The Solitary War of a Sniper. It's coming out in May, and it's Harry Furness. So he's an exemplar, if you like, of the battalion sniper. So he was the Hallamshire Battalion of the Yorkshire and Lancashire Regiment. There's a picture on the cover of this book that's coming out, and he's in his Denison smock and camoed up and looks the part with his No.4 T. So that's going to be worth a look. And Captain Shaw's book and Martin's previous book, Out of Nowhere, is a nice sort of... That's the whole history of sniping, though. There isn't a huge amount of detail on British World War II sniper. So it interested me that you said that they had this quite positive reputation post-war. Of course, snipers had a terrible reputation during both wars because they might get you killed, or they were the cold-blooded killers that would kill you, from out of nowhere. The Suicide Club, whatever you want to call them, people didn't want to associate with them. I'm sure this is not universally true, but people, the idea that these guys were hunters of men is kind of interesting. But Captain Shaw explicitly says, paraphrasing, I don't want that kind of man. I want the calm, assured, calculating. I don't want someone who, and maybe this is actually it. Maybe this is the problem. The generic, the rest of the British Army is being taught by sort of 1942-ish actively to hate the enemy, kill the enemy. It's all kill, kill, kill. We get language that we haven't really seen in military literature before. I'm sure it was there in training, but whereas the sniper is more detached, more calculating, more calm. So although he describes them as being not maniacs, I think most soldiers would see someone who can just squeeze a trigger and take a life looking through glass. They would see them as the weirdos, and the guys that charge with a bayonet into a door, they're more, their blood is up. It's more forgivable to be. All the psychology of this is pretty fascinating, I think.
I think there's certainly a generational gap. This was when the mindset really changed in World War II. It's sort of in World War I, you talk about the French going into battle with very colorful uniforms and really pressing on morale versus tactics and things like that. I mean, it's the old world type of thinking. I think this is the last breath of that style of war mentality being expressed in the battlefield. World War II was fairly brutal, and I think there was no space for that type of mentality. But it's been a while I've read this book, and I should have brushed up on it. I did think that Steve Houghton's book is a decent reference towards, if you wanted a general guidebook to give you better than Wikipedia direction. And I don't say that in I don't use the word better than Wikipedia in pressing down the position of Steve's. The British Sniper is a fairly good general overview of some of the UK or the British Sniper rifles from World War II all the way up to the Arctic warfares and onwards. I think he has the AXMC in there as well. But when it comes to, I don't know if this is my perception. I don't know if it's one from video games, because video games very much built up the British Sniper to be a legend. And then the other one would be I grew up in a colony. In the colony, you tend to look at the British forces with rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, I also think, a lot of the things that we come to regard as iconic or particularly successful, they get there over the course of 5 years of the war, but they're not necessarily going to be there at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Maybe the exception of it's the reverse. Well, not the reverse, but something like the Spitfire kind of comes onto the scene, makes a huge impression, and then is amazing throughout to a greater or lesser extent. But a lot of that kit you've got to learn to use it properly. You've got to iron out the kinks, and that only happens after at least a year or so of of development. So if you dive in and look at specific stories, you'll see people complaining about it. It's always good to go back to the primary sources. And actually, Houghton's book, I completely endorse that as well, and that includes some of the stories from Harry Furness, who, by the way, we believe is the most prolific. He's the Simo hire of Great Britain, and he only passed away a few years ago, like
Wow.
2022, something like that. Sadly,
How old was he?
I think he was like 96 or 97. So.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I would have come across him, but it's always sad in a selfish way that when someone has made it so far into the present day, but they're not, we can't throw him on this discussion right now. But yeah, so he is well up there, and the fact that Martin's got this book coming out that will expand on the references in Steve's book, I'm really looking forward to that. Because it's really, you and I, we want to know, we want to know the techie stuff. We want our hands on the objects, but we also want to know what the guys who actually used them thought of them, and how effective they were at a given distance. Which is why I'm so fascinated with what you did with this thing. And I think it was your suggestion. Should I take this out to 1,000? And I just replied, do it. Because absolutely, I wanted you to do that.
So you were saying, what were the engagement distances that were expected for the British snipers back then? And granted, they were not using hand-loaded ammunition, right? Like I remember the UK only had ball ammo that was available for troops. Or am I right or wrong on that?
So broadly speaking, I think that is correct. I believe they were issued. So it's something like 50 rounds of small arms ammunition, ball 303, 5 tracer rounds. I'm not really sure what the point of that was. Spotting in theory, but and 5 AP. Yeah. If you've really had enough of it all and you just want to, or maybe draw attention and then relocate. I don't know. But drawing fire was something that I believe snipers did actually deliberately do.
Well, I didn't mean it in the facetious way of drawing fire to their own position, but yes, that too. I think the theory is point directing fire towards a target.
Yes, look over there, like an infrared laser on if everyone's wearing nods, that kind of idea. But in this case, everyone sees it. So
and you said also 5 AP.
Apparently, yeah. Very limited amount of armor-piercing rounds. I'm not sure if they would have. I don't remember ever reading of them being used. There's some discussion of ammunition. Shaw talks about lovingly polishing his standard Mark 7 SAA ball ammunition, which would surely make it less accurate, if anything.
Right.
If you're forever rubbing away bits of brass and copper. But anyway. Yeah, so your results, I think, are really fascinating. So we have a standard here for an accuracy minimum, right? So not like maximum effective, but we're coming to that. So we have to pass as a sniping rifle. This thing had to put 7 out of 7 shots in a 5-inch circle at 200 yards.
Okay,
and then 6 out of 7. In a 10-inch circle at 400 yards. So if you're dropping shots at 450, you are within that standard.
Oh, interesting.
But then it gets really interesting with what the thing is really capable of. Because in my head, and maybe it's because I spent more time reading about First World War sniping, which is more like precision shooting, often with irons, at 100 or 200 or 300, sort of, probably not much further than that. No, they were shooting these things. They were expected to be able to score a hit on a torso consistently at 400 yards.
Okay.
So headshots at 200 consistently, torso shots at 400 consistently. And that means you could push this thing out to 500. There's one story, I think it's Harry Furness, and he's shooting out to 7. So British sniper in Italy, scouting with 2 GIs, prior to a British unit taking over from the Americans near Mount Grande, I guess that's pronounced, when he spotted Germans 700 yards away So when I saw 700 on your readout thing, I'm like, wow. But actually, not unheard of. Spotted German 700 yards away. He opened fire from a ruined house and scored at least 2 hits. Commented that the Germans' attitude after this was not half so cocksure and brazen as formerly. So he had made them rethink their life choices and had scored 2 hits at 700. And it's easy to say, well, that's at the extreme end of the thing. And I think it was. I think that's going to be by exception. But over the course of several years of war, it's going to have happened a number of times. Equally, there's a story of a German, when you stick a decoy up and see where they're shooting from and that kind of thing. So there was a German that failed to hit a fake head on a stick at, I think it was supposed to be 500-600 yards, and he was struggling to hit that. This is where your skill comes in. The platform is capable of 7, 8, 1,000 yards, as you have ably proven, but you've got to have that skill. And favorable conditions, of course. Although your conditions weren't that favorable.
No,
you had a lot of wind on that.
We had some wind, and you could see that the misses that I had were mostly windage. I would say the farther I pressed the optic, there was a divergence between the optic's camming and the actual projectile. Okay. So I can't remember if I had to. I can't remember the actual setting I had the optic on, but I believe I had it on a lower distance and it was hitting at a longer distance, which now that you say it was supposed to be for a Bren, that sort of makes sense. I don't know. But the longer distance shots most certainly were more difficult to hit. I would imagine, though, it would be even more difficult for Harry to hit because he had no spotter. Presumably, if he were with 2 GIs, they were not trained spotters and not someone who he worked with. I work with Josh all the time. He knows exactly what I'm thinking. I know what he's thinking. Corrections he gives me are fairly exact, and we've got our own system working towards that. Him not having a spotter is significantly more difficult than me working. Even if I had much higher wins, having a spotter in that position is going to be a huge advantage. Huge.
Yeah, I guess I should caveat that I read that the same way, that implying that he was on his own with 2 GIs. Normally, a British sniper would be working as a pair,
right,
with a spotter, and they had spotting scopes, but they were very much, I see no ships kind of.
Right. Yeah. The very classic looking, used all the way up into the Falklands, might I add.
Yeah. And I'm being facetious. They were, I think they regarded as maybe a bit old hat in design, but you could do good work with them, and they did. So yeah, we're kind of in this transition.
That sounds like government. That sounds like government procurement telling you to bug off because they don't want to get anything new.
It was a repurposed scouting scope.
Right.
You had binoculars and you had a 3-stage old-fashioned telescope. Well before the modern situation. But you can think of this as a transitional phase in the development of sniping, not only the rifles but the expertise, the tactics, the doctrine, because you've gone from mainly lone guys, maybe working out 200 yards ish, is my impression, often without a scope in the First World War, to scoped rifles, somewhat more precise, sniper spotter teams with basic kit, basic camouflage that's standard issue, and you're starting to relearn again how to be a sniper. And then by the end of the war, we have some proper training kicking in. And then, able to reach out to 1,000 yards. And then all of that becomes so much more refined and so standardized that by, decades later, you've got what we now think of as modern sniping. Purely, entirely scratch designed rifles in many cases, much more, much better magnification, clarity of everything, reticles, proper established training that we're now no longer doing away with after every war. So this is like, as is so common with the Second World War, it's really where most of what we know later gets learned, I think is fair to say.
Now, unfortunately, guys, this is a much too long of a conversation that I had with Jonathan. So we're going to cut it short on this channel.
Now, what we will do, we'll take the rest of it and pack it over to the podcast channel so you can spend the entire hour watching if you'd like. Now, if you want to start where this drops off, I'll put the time frame below that you could reference to on where to click to when you click over to the podcast channel. But if you look up 9H podcast, you'll find the full version of this discussion with Jonathan Ferguson, Keeper of Arms and Artillery at the Royal Armories in Leeds. I think I got it right. Anyways, we'll skip to the very end of this video first. I'll see you there. Jonathan, wait a second. Let's see. Mr. Jonathan Ferguson, Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armories in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. I have a question for you, sir.
Yes.
What was the best sniper rifle from World War II?
Clearly, it was the number 14. No, I'm going to. I think you know me by now. I am not the guy to jump in and say that any one thing is objectively better than any other thing. There are always nuances. There are always caveats. There's always context, as Matt Easton likes to.
Jonathan, you kill me with this.
But I will say that for the time period, given the fact that they managed to standardize this thing and make enough of them to make a difference, and it shoots so well, at least in some people's hands, and it has 10 rounds on board, and the scope is not at all bad, and it even lasts until the Falklands on the L42A1. Although, is that a ringing endorsement, or is that just because we didn't modernize quick enough? But anyway.
It's so good that it lasted the years.
Yeah.
So the answer is clearly the number 4 Mark 1T with caveats, with Jonathan's caveats.
I am always conscious of bias as well. I grow up especially on the British firearms. I think the Bren is the best light machine gun. Well, I actually think I could say that. There's a good argument for that, not just because we're British, apart from anything else, because it's actually Czech. This thing is largely homegrown, albeit with a North American action. It's up there. A lot of people would say the Mauser is better in certain ways, but I would say this scope combo with this weapon is arguably better. We've got the M41B argument, which I think is a tough one. You yourself said that this thing is narrowly the best sniper rifle of the Second World War.
I've said that in the past, yes. I've made some revisions on the M41B video, but also made some caveats to that. I do agree with you on a few things. So from the shooting perspective, putting your shooter in a very comfortable shooting position, huge plus, massive plus from a shooter's perspective. 10-round magazines, huge plus, because you don't know when you step into what we now know as a designated marksman role, but back then it's just sniper supporting infantry. The optics intuitive, great dials, very tactile, very rugged optic, I might add.
Decent clarity, decent field of view.
Yeah. For what it was, it's not. The German glass is nicer than this, but it's very usable. It's not so much nicer that it blows it out. No, it's fine. This is very usable.
It's fine. It's
good. It's good. It's good enough for government work.
That's the other one.
The one thing that people do worry about is logistics, but I don't think that is a valid argument if you're talking about different nations fielding different rifles. Those particular nations. If you're America, you'll always have a logistics perk.
Yep.
That's the bottom line. But all of these things make the Lee-Enfield No. 4 Mark 1T rank really one of the top snipers if we're purely talking about shooting. Now,
Some of the other rifles have certain goods and bads. The 98K, I think it has standardization huge problem, as you've talked about, and in a sense that this is a military logistics question, but it goes beyond just ammunition supply. Um, it's not interchangeable. Things like this, the Mosin Nagant PU sniper, PEM sniper, and the American 03A4 sniper, all of those components are interchangeable. No, you cannot twist the optic off of the 03A4 and switch to a long scope unital in the heat of battle. That is fiction. But to the point of you have multiples of these things in the field, you need components to replace them that you
Right.
can fix them in the field. So, yeah, I think from a military perspective, uh, given the state of British logistics in World War II, being able to crank out thousands of these was certainly a feat. I think the UK was most certainly one of the most logistically hampered nations in World War II, even more so than the Russians. Certainly more so than the Russians, I think, because the Russians were able to push everything beyond the Urals and continue manufacturing. So given the logistical, it shouldn't even be that. So take logistics off the table. I do think that this is one of the best rifles and could be argued as could be argued as the best rifle with caveats.
All things considered, with caveats.
Right.
Bearing in mind, I'm a Brit and you have affiliations.
But still, this is a topic that I'm asking everybody, because this is a topic that we're planning on doing a video on. What is the best sniper rifle from World War II? Because we actually have most of them minus the Japanese Type 99 sniper on deck.
Ooh, interesting. But final thought for you: what if the best one is this one?
Do tell.
What if the improved? What if the Canadian No.4T is in fact the product improved No.4 that we never got? Because this thing on my lap saw service right through Korea, until the L42 comes in. The Canadians did a couple of things. One, I think, was just out of convenience. So they've got a locally made version, and I don't think there's anything really to choose between them, of the No.32. So the C No.32, this is a Mark IV, happens to be green painted. So, I mean, that's arguably a bit tweaked. It has, I mean, I guess it's no lower. The mount is no lower. And arguably that's, I don't know if that's better or worse.
The mounting mechanism certainly seems better than the UK style.
I mean, it feels like it, doesn't it? It's more modern. The mount stays on the gun, and you unlatch and remove the optic and put that on there, whereas the mount stays on the optic on the UK version. So it certainly feels more modern. And then they also experimented, at least, with a full-on pistol grip style stock with a built-in cheek piece and a rubber recoil pad. And the whole thing feels to me, as an amateur, even more comfortable and shootable, but I don't know if that's true.
I think we have to leave this to the audience to discuss. I've never actually seen that version of the T.
Yeah,
thanks for showing it.
No, you're welcome. The beauty of this collection is, you read about something, you go, I wonder if we have that, and often you do.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. The No.4 Mark 1T. Was it one of the best or the best snipers in World War II?
Those are the two options. It's either one of the best or the best.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll leave it up to you to discuss in the comments section. Jonathan, any last words before we wrap this?
I feel the need to try and think of a tea pun, but I can't. So I will just comment and say that what you were drinking on the range there was not tea.
Tea from the colonies. Well, I think that is an invitation for me to invite myself to see Jonathan and have real tea.
Please do. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
very, very welcome. Just promise not to throw it in the harbour.
Hey, Jonathan, ethnically I'm Chinese. We don't do that.
Good, good.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Jonathan for hopping in on this short discussion on the lee-enfield sniper. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please do like, comment, and subscribe. And we can find Jonathan at the Royal Armories.
Yes, we have our own YouTube channel, weekly uploads there featuring yours truly, unless I'm on holiday or ill. And I am back doing the gaming thing at EXP, which is Watch EXP on YouTube. And you might see me pop up in other places as well. Please come and visit the museums if you can, and keep an eye out on events, that kind of thing.
Jonathan, we've got to get the Royal Armories out here in Texas to do some field experimentation and some impressions on some of these extended ranges. So, open invite to you, as always. And audience, please encourage them to come hang out with us. We do like friends. And
start that GoFundMe now.
And for now, I had a lot of fun. But until next time, we shall see you on the range.
This is Steel 96, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green. How copy, over?
Steel 96, this is 716, roger, over. 1-6, Steel 91, 1 pack, green, green, over. This is 716, roger, over.
1-6, Steel 92, 1 Victor, 2 packs, Redcon 1, over.